Welcome to our Monday, January 31st, 2022, 2:00 executive cabinet meeting. Let the record reflect that all three commissioners are present. Our executive management team, we've also been joined by Scott Chesney, our planning director, and Jessica Pilgrim, the attorney for the planning, and Mark McLean, our civil attorney. So there we go. So I think Scott, I'm not sure if Scott or Jessica, who's going to take the lead on this topic.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Scott, we are before you with something almost resembling a housekeeping item, but it's before you as part of an abundance of caution in how we handle our business. It is the comp plan amendment. It's called 21 CPA 05. It is the 5 Mile Estates plat. And as you recall from the December 14th briefing, this is being put into the urban growth area and zoned appropriately as it has started to develop. And that was one of the agreements in the settlement agreement, is if that happened, it would be put in to the urban growth area without objection. It was on your December 14th agenda. It was briefed on, unfortunately, on the resolution for approval. This was omitted. And so we're back before you to correct that, run it through the process in the proper manner. And it's my understanding that it will be for you on action on February 8th. Jessica, anything to add?
It's just a bit of clarification. So basically, as Scott said, the board actually adopted by way of resolution 2021-0860 this comprehensive plan amendment. And like Scott said, in essence, what happened was it was noticed properly on the board's agenda for the Friday before. However, if a person clicked on the link, the proposed resolution that was brought up inadvertently omitted 21 CPA 05. And in that way, out of an abundance of caution, like Scott mentioned, we just think, given the public participation and planning guidelines, that we should probably renotice that. So what the board will see on for February 8th is actually a partial rescission of that resolution 2021-0860, only insofar as 21 CPA 05, and then also on that same resolution will be a readoption of the 21 CPA 05. So basically undoing it, renoticing it, and doing it over again so that we're all good to go with the Growth Management Act.
Very good, thank you. Appreciate you briefing us and letting us know. Are there any other questions or comments for Scott or Jessica? Seeing none, okay. Thank you both for sharing that with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Okay, we've now been joined by Mike Burgess. Mike is going to talk about the 2022 give us a legislative update.
Hello, commissioners. I will just jump in if that's okay with you. Looks like Ron's sharing an agenda for me. I appreciate that, Ron. Mostly updates today on where things are and maybe a couple new items. This is day 22 of 60. Next really important date we come up to is the first cutoff. That's the policy committee cutoff on Thursday, February 3rd. What will happen next then, bills that cost money have to go to the fiscal committees. There will be marathon fiscal committee meetings on Friday, maybe on the weekend in the House. The Senate usually doesn't meet on the weekends. And then Monday, Tuesday for that fiscal committee cutoff. And then they will spend about a week on the floor and then go back to the committee process in the opposite body. In the meantime, I would expect to see a budget come out probably right when they get back into the committee process. So we're a couple weeks away from seeing a supplemental budget proposal. And then that kind of starts to wrap things up for the session. Wanted to let you know that the long-term care tax bills, I'm sure you read in the papers that the governor did in fact sign those last week. Two bills. The first is a delays the implementation of the bill and all of those things associated with it until July of 2023. The other bill is a bill that will put in statute some exemptions to the bill or to the program, and that should take care of the situation where I know that you probably have a handful of employees that live in Idaho that would have had to have been paying in. That bill should take care of that issue. So the out of state should be exempt now. And then, but back to just the whole program at hand, as it was explained to me, as an employer, I believe you're still going to be encouraged to maintain the letters that I think you're supposed to have been getting letters from your employees when they get exemptions. Because even though it's delayed, I think folks can still go out and file for the exemption letter that they would get from the state, and they're supposed to share that with their employer. So I'm just throwing that out. I heard that on an Association of Washington Business call. So if there's some HR questions that need to be clarified, I'm happy to try to do that myself or steer you in the right direction to solve those problems as to how you deal with your workforce.
Okay. Mike, just so you know, I just saw Ashley Cameron, our HR director, said that you are correct and we are still maintaining those letters in a file.
Thank goodness I was right about that.
So yes. And then one question I have on that too is with the out-of-state exemption, are they exempting for military spouses?
Yes, there's another component to that. You know what, Commissioner, I should have mentioned that too because of Fairchild and the military presence over there. Yes, I just mentioned the out of state.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I should have thought of that. The next bill on the list is 1838-5727. This is the salmon habitat issue I've brought up to you. And last meeting, we were going to submit a letter to the legislature with some county impacts. At this point, I don't know that we need to be doing that. In the middle of last week, or maybe even after we had spoken, the House sponsor, which was the bill that was going to be moving, announced that the bill will not move. The Senate bill never did get a hearing. The Senate committee is doing a work session on the governor's salmon habitat proposal, which is what these bills were. But at this point, I don't anticipate anything to move. There's a lot of pushback for the reasons that we talked about. And I think Commissioner French relayed some of those that he had heard through Association of Counties in terms of the lack of stakeholder outreach, impact on voluntary stewardship. All of those things are figuring into this. On that side, the private landowners, farmers, ag are all involved too. So this issue is not going away. But I imagine I would have looked for some budget proviso language that would direct there to be some sort of a work group or something on this, that we would backfill the work that would be done on behalf of the counties, on behalf of Wasatch. So at this point, we'll probably stop talking about those bills moving forward until we see what the budget looks like and there is some proviso language, unless something changes. If that does change, I'll reapproach about getting a letter drafted. I'd kind of loosely begun to draft one. Jeff and I split up the list. We did a couple letters last week, but I told him I'd take the salmon habitat letter on. But once the bills don't look like they're moving, I held off. But if I need to re-up that effort, I will. But at this point, I think we'll just hold tight and wait and see what the legislature does, if anything. The organic materials management issue, 1799 is the bill in play that the House bill did, or the Senate bill did not move. There's a committee vote on that bill tomorrow. I've got some feedback from Deb Geiger that Chad got to me that I will message. We have a couple legislators on that committee. I will message them, but there's a long chorus of folks in opposition to that bill. Next, 1925, that's the civil infractions issue that your director Chase brought up with you. That bill hasn't moved from committee yet. I'm not concerned about that. It has a few more days to get out this week. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. It should probably just go to the floor. It doesn't cost any money. So it's not a bill that would need to go to the fiscal committee. At least it shouldn't. Stranger things have happened though. So we'll have to wait and see there. The 1918, the reducing emissions for outdoor power equipment, that bill was amended to exempt safety equipment, but it's geared towards more DOT and Fish and Wildlife and those folks. By my read, it does not solve the problem for the county. So we'll continue to oppose that, and I'll work with other stakeholders that should have an interest. I have some calls out to some other people that should be interested in this. School districts should have a concern about maintaining their fields. And there's a couple others that a group of us kind of brainstormed. So I'm doing some outreach there. The next one, 1703. Excuse me, back to 1918. Like I said, it did move out of committee. It was amended when it went out of committee, but it went to the finance committee. And that's because there is the tax portion of that. You'll remember there was an increase in the tax rate, essentially a doubling if you're purchasing that equipment. So that's why it did go to the finance committee. And it will need to move from committee there by the middle of next week. The 911 modernization, that's House Bill 1703. That bill has moved through its committee process and has broad bipartisan support. I don't at this point see any hiccups with that. The 1722, the broadband deployment, that is the one that was Chad spoke to you about, referred to as micro trenching. And I've worked with my colleague at WASAC on that bill. At this point, it's scheduled for executive action on February 2nd, a couple days from now. I've not seen amendments that have made that better. Haven't connected with my colleague either to get the lay of the land. There was a meeting of WASAC staff and some of the proponents of that bill to see if there wasn't some middle ground that could be reached. And that was late Friday. I haven't gotten the results of that meeting. So we'll continue to watch that bill. The next one, 5901, that is the economic development tax deferral that we talked about last week that you all signed a letter in support of. Commissioner Kearns testified in favor of that bill. Its executive session is scheduled for tomorrow. So we'll have to see when that comes out of committee. It would need to go to Ways and Means because of the tax implications of that. But given the sponsors that are involved in that bill, Senator Billig's number 2 on that bill, I would anticipate that bill to continue to move at least through the Senate and then become part of the budget discussion as we move forward in session. The last one, Commissioner Cuney, if you wanted to speak a little bit about this one. This is 5853, leasing of certain DOT properties. There's a Spokane connection to this bill. You had reached out to me about it specifically, and I wanted to bring it to the board for their discussion.
Yeah, I think Councilmember Wilkerson had sent out an email, and I think the East Sprague Business District also too regarding this bill. And so I reached out to talk to Mike Gribner to see what this bill was about. And so evidently it's some of the extra right-of-way that they have on part of the construction of the north-south corridor that they will not need once it's built. They're looking at doing a lease in the future on that property, that then those revenues would stay within the Eastern Washington DOT for maintenance and operation money. Partly I was concerned, I didn't want to make sure we were giving away more before construction is finalized on the north-south corridor. And so I was told that no, that's not their intent, that as it's finished, then they'll look at what is extra and what they could do with that, those properties, and the leasing gives them an opportunity for it to come back to Eastern Washington's region, that revenue stream, versus if they just sell it, it's gone and it's goes to the state DOT realm. So I'm in favor of it. I think I did sign in last week just as myself for it, but I didn't know if the other commissioners wanted to look at supporting that. So I know Josh, you or Al have taken a look at that or known about it, but
I have not. I just pulled up the bill report now as you were talking. So this is a very Spokane specific bill that does not look like this impacts anywhere else in the state. Based on the bill report, it says encourages the Department of Transportation to allow affected property to be used for community purposes made unavailable due to the placement of Interstate 90 and the US 395 North Spokane Corridor project in Spokane. As I look at, there's only one Spokane legislator. Actually, there's only one Eastern Washington legislator that's even signed on to it. Any idea why that would be, Mike? Why there's only,
I don't know,
very
Commissioner. I just know that
Spokane-centric,
obviously you
there's
see who
only
the prime
one.
sponsor is there, Senator Billig.
Yeah.
I see
Uh,
Commissioner French has raised his hand.
Well, I'll wait until Commissioner Kearns is finished.
Oh, no, I'm done. I'm quickly trying to read through the
Yeah,
report. So you go ahead. I'm not familiar with the bill, so.
so I am familiar with the bill and I'm familiar with the effort and have no problem supporting it. Though one thing, and I've not seen the final language in the bill. Does it say that it's they've identified a use for the property, or just that the city of Spokane will have the opportunity to lease the property? And I'll give you a little background. I had a conversation with Councilwoman Wilkerson on this, as well as ESPA, and the initial intent from their organization was to address low-income housing. And that I have a concern about, because it doesn't address the issue of social equity. That this is a freeway cutting a neighborhood in half, and then you're going to put low-income housing right next to that freeway. I guess as I look at residential property, if I wouldn't live there, why would I ask somebody else to live there? And with the noise and everything else that's going to be generated, well, it is generated off I-90 now, but will be generated with the north-south corridor connecting to it. This is not going to be prime location for housing. It'd be good for other uses or a buffer to low-income housing, but that was the only concern I had, was that if the bill predetermined what the use of the property was going to be, I'd have more.
Commissioner, I might add to you, it does not by my read. Ron, I'm sorry, Ron, put you on the spot. Can you bring up the bill? 5853 is the number. And then page 2 of the bill is where the uses are, I guess I'd call that. But it says here, placement of highway projects section, housing, ancillary improvements, parks, community revitalization projects, enhanced public space such as trails, projects that provide enhanced economic development in the community. So looks like there's a menu there, commissioners, but not specific housing. Of course, Commissioner French is one of them that I read there in the beginning.
Yeah.
But it doesn't look like it's predetermined.
Well, and the area is a good.
Middle of the next page there, Ron. Thanks.
The area they're talking about, it's a good full 1 block deep and stuff. So you could have some industrial development, some office development along the freeway, and then housing next to the on the other side of that from the freeway. So I don't have any problem supporting it. I understand what the neighborhood's trying to achieve, and I'm in support of it.
Okay, I can relay that then to our delegation members. It's already had its hearing. It has not been voted from committee yet, but I will, work that moving forward and relay your support of it.
Yeah, I just read through the bill report. Now it looks like, like you were saying, it's not just specifically for one. There's multiple purposes that this land can be used for, and if I'm reading it correctly, it looks like the funds from the lease would stay local as well as far as DOT's use for it. So I think that's a good thing.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Ron. If you want to flip back to the agenda, actually, if you could open that letter I'd sent you from the Association of Counties. This was their budget letter. It's something, a normal thing that they do. And I'm wondering if we don't want to send something similar but not maybe as many items on this. And so you'll notice that if you want to go to keep scrolling to the next page, Ron, in bold, there will be so fully funding state v. Blake. That is definitely something that's was on your legislative agenda and is impacts the county. Involuntary Treatment Act and costs associated with non-Medicaid funding. Those are issues we've talked about in the past. I haven't heard us talk much about the Fund for Equitable Public Defense or veteran service officers. That isn't to suggest that isn't something that you all would support. But I guess what I'm wondering is, do we want to submit our own letter with to our Spokane delegation and pick off a few of these items and piggyback with the association or some other things that we want to include? And I don't know the best way to. We don't need to nail that down right now. But I don't know if you as commissioners, if you wanted to take a few minutes, maybe later today and this evening, as though you don't have enough to do, but to read through this and maybe pick a few items that we want to relay or just mirror the whole letter. I don't know if every one of these priorities would be a priority that you would want to list specific to the county. Not that you wouldn't support them, but just it's not really something that the county has an issue with. Might be something better that we revisit next week if you can take some time to view this.
Okay, and did you send it to all three commissioners or?
No, I only gave it to Ron, Gina, and Jeff, but I will definitely email it directly to the three of you after this meeting if you wanted to take a glance through it. And then we'll put it on the agenda for next Monday, because our bill information won't change a lot. If anything, the bills we talk about are going to narrow just because of where we're at in session. So we could probably spend a little more time going through this, which sounds to me might be a better way to go about this.
Yeah, and was this talked about at the LSC meeting on Friday?
I was in and out of that, Commissioner. In all likelihood, they probably drafted this letter based on their, the guiding principles for the association and past issues. So I don't know that legislative steering specifically approved this letter, but it meets with the criteria that WASAC would have adopted in the past.
Okay. I'm just having Ron scroll to the end to see who signed it.
That just came from Melanie.
Okay,
Yeah.
just from Melanie. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, no, I guess I'd like to take a look at it and
Okay.
see.
Then I will email it to the three of you here this afternoon. If you wanted to, again, take a look at it, maybe we could pick off a few of those points and then, craft them to Spokane, on Blake. We could certainly fill in the blanks with some things specific to Blake and Spokane impacts and piggyback on some of those. The growth management section, I think, is something you'd probably want to take a look at. And that's it. I get one other quick update. You'll remember that on our agenda, we had the CPACER program. There is a bill out there that might be an avenue to amend it. I'm still working through some of the kinks on that. Mark McLean and I spoke earlier today because there was some language. I was checking to see if the new bill language, which the County Treasurers Association supports, solved some of the issues that Mark had raised with me pre-session. It doesn't sound like they do, but I'm trying to figure out if there might be some disagreement amongst your peer counties as to whether or not that's an issue. And it had to do with, and Mark's gonna have to help me. Thank you for turning your camera on. But dealing with the title and delinquent taxes and clearing it. Then there's a second issue that deals with the manual or guideline book that the counties adopt. And I think that that's something we could take a look at. But on the title side, I think that there's some disagreement from one county to the next, just in how people are interpreting that.
Okay, Mark,
And if you-
before you go, Commissioner French has his hand up, so I'm gonna let him go.
Thank you, Madam Chair, but I'll defer to Mark and then I'll comment.
Okay.
And thank you. The issue on the foreclosure is still something we're working on to try to figure out how to address this. The way the legislation currently works is you can't, if there's an arrearage, let's say there's a loan out there, and let's say we're 2 years into the loan and say it's a 10-year term, and they haven't paid year one and now they haven't paid year two. You can only foreclose on those years and you can't close out the balance of the loan. So you end up with a loan that's hanging out there attached to to some entity or perhaps even with the land. I think it doesn't run with the land at this point. So, but how to clear that is really the issue. So we're trying to work on that. The other issue is that's probably more interesting to you is, let's say this county goes forward and puts forward all the effort to enact this program, and then the state goes and adopts its program. Well, now we're subject to all the state requirements. And I know that, you know, our issues for our county are more unique to Spokane, not necessarily the state. So I think those are issues that need to be addressed. And I think the latter one can be.
Commissioner French.
So, Mark, if the state were to adopt its own program, they would do that. They wouldn't do that in competition with the counties. And so wouldn't one program get enacted and the other program would go away?
Yeah, basically the state program would be the one that we would be operating under, and our county program that we put the effort into would go away. And we'd have to operate it at the way the legislation is currently written. We would have to then accept their documents, their guidebooks, the entirety of their program essentially. And so it makes it a state specific program rather than a county specific program.
But it solves the problem with regard to foreclosure, because now it's the state's problem, and also risk, doesn't it? Or
I don't think so. Yeah, at this point, we don't think so, because the property is still within the county. I'm not saying that the county necessarily has any exposure in terms of financial risk. Our risk is not being able to clear a property, end up with some derelict property, things like that. We are still internally working on that, given some more information that Mike has shared with us. And we are going to be looking to talk to Mr. Volz as soon as we can about this. So that's kind of where we are.
Okay, I had a conversation with him yesterday,
Mhm.
and he shared with me some of the concerns that treasurers have with regard to the foreclosure proceedings and stuff. So, so Mike, how many times do you think they're going to take a swing at this before they either pass something or take a pass on something?
Well, Commissioner, I'd have to talk to the prime sponsor. So the difference is, I mean, just from a mechanics of doing my job, it'd be easier if this were a House bill right now. It's a Senate bill. So it's not before, Representative Volz and others. Representative Volz is certainly in a unique position to understand this stuff. I'd have to reach out to the Senate sponsor about it. As Mark mentioned, I think that the county versus state program issue is almost one of fairness, in the sense that if you do go through the work to adopt this program, you've done the work, why should what the state does all of a sudden take precedent over it? So I'm wondering if there isn't a way to adjust the language to say something in statute, like if the county's already gone ahead and done this, if it meets, the criteria of the state program, the county program can stay in place, and something like that. But as Mark said, that does not take care of the clearing of the title issue. That's another issue, and that's the one where I'm hearing conflicting information, that some counties don't view that as an issue, and so someone there is interpreting it different than we're interpreting it. So that's the one that's a little more complex.
Yeah, there are 4 counties that have said it's not an issue for us, we're moving forward, and they've gone ahead and adopted it.
Right.
And said, whatever risk there is, we're going to absorb it. And I don't know, we're of a mind to absorb risk, and certainly not into not looking to engage in a program that gets you in a spiral that you can't get out of with regard to clearing title.
Mhm.
I mean, if we can't clear title, we can't even auction off the property, I don't believe. So there's just a litany of challenges. My concern is, we've only, I don't know how much longer they're going to be able to work on this until they finally say, we're going to pass something that's inadequate, or we're just going to pass on it altogether and work on it next year, which means it puts off the program for us for a whole nother year before we can do anything with it.
Well, that's why, Commissioner, there's a vehicle out there now with this bill that there might be a chance to make the changes that we're talking about. But the question then becomes, though, if some of your county colleagues, like you mentioned, I think you said 4 counties have gone forward, have done this, one of the pushbacks from the legislature is going to be, well, why do you have an issue if these other ones don't? You know, it becomes a logical problem for us to overcome.
Well, the response is we're not lemons and we don't follow them over the edge of the cliff.
Yes, thank
Feel
you.
free to use that.
I will, Commissioner, verbatim.
Yeah, thank you.
You got it.
So Mark, I see you've raised your hand.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I was just hoping to get a list of those counties. I think, wasn't Clark one of them or something?
I know
Yeah,
Clark is one.
I think it's Clark, Whatcom, King and Pierce.
Okay, I'll try to reach out to some counterparts there as well.
Thank you.
But Commissioner, your concern is well taken. I mean, at some point, we're going to run out of time, but there is time, and I don't view what we're asking, excuse me, what we're asking is antagonistic. This is clarification, because at the end of the day, you want to do the program. You have people locally that are interested, from what I understand. It's just that you see some barriers in the law and the statute that maybe some others don't. So we're trying to get there. We want to do this. This isn't something that you don't want to do based on my understanding of it.
Yeah, well, and the challenge is that the legislature has also adopted some other timelines with regard to retrofitting existing buildings.
Correct.
And without a path forward in terms of securing the financing to do that, some of our building owners, our property owners are going to get stuck between a rock and a hard spot with a mandate from the legislature that says thou shalt, and the county standing in the way because we don't want to take on risk. And I really don't want to see the county in the crosshairs for local business owners trying to just adhere to the law.
Understood. So I've got some additional work to do. I'm sure Mark and I'll be in conversations more about this. And then we'll keep going.
Okay,
There-
Thank you.
Mark has raised his hand one more time.
Sorry about that. There was just one more aspect of this I wanted to mention. If you'll recall, Commerce did get this as a bill. The funding was then pulled when COVID started. So Commerce still has this as something I'm sure that's on their working plan. And so it is still working forward as a state issue, I'm sure. Just want to remind you of that.
That's a good point, Mark. So you're suggesting it will need to be funded in the budget.
Right.
Because it was vetoed at the beginning of COVID, probably.
The funding was pulled, yeah.
Yeah, that happened to a bunch of bills.
Right.
Okay.
So Mike, so you'll look into that?
Yeah, I'll dig in some more.
Okay, thank you.
All righty. That's it for me, commissioners.
Just a second, Scott has his hand raised.
Thank you, Commissioner Puny. The quick question for Mike on that House Bill 1703, the modernizing 911. I may have missed it in your past updates. Anything? I scanned through it. It looks like most of it's just kind of getting to current day technology. Is there anything in there that you see that we might be want to pay attention to for our regional Shrek system here?
I can reach back out to Lori, but I had a conversation with Lori about this like 3 weeks ago when I saw the bill was introduced, and she said she was all good with it. And okay. So I'll tell you what I'll do though, Scott. I'll message her, I'll email her and just say, hey, this is the current version of the language. Came up on my call with the commissioners, take one more peek, and I imagine she'll be good to go. How about I just CC you on the email too, and we'll do it that way.
That'd be great. Thank you.
You got it.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike. Anything
All
else
right.
from us?
I'm good. Thank you all. Have a good week.
Okay, you too. Thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Of course. All right. See you soon. Bye.
Okay. So next on our agenda is Doug Chase and Paul Knowles to discuss Vista Stadium discussion. I see we've been joined by Casey Evans and Chris Duff from the Spokane Indians as well.
Oh,
Hi, Doug. I'll let you go take it from here.
very good. Okay, and I think we have 4 slides that are all set. Thank you, Gina or Ron. And I'll go ahead and start. Again, thank you for the opportunity to follow up on our workshop we had last week. There were a few questions we're hoping to share some progress on. And one of the follow-ups I wanted to lead with is just a little research that we did since last week related to the various ballot measure options that the committee may come back and recommend. And there were some discussion about, I guess, a couple different potential combinations. So had an opportunity to seek some assistance and do some research. And one of the things that we learned, and I'll just go through it here, is we do have some options that are available and that are not available. And so in terms of those that are available, we can look at a measure or having a measure on the ballot that would be for the Avista Stadium enhancements only. We could have an option that would allow for the park and recreation enhancements only. And another option we could have would be the stadium enhancements combined with park and recreation enhancements as a single ballot item. That would be an option. And yet another option is if we wanted to have two ballot measures before the voters to consider, we would be able to have the stadium enhancements only as one option and the park and recreation enhancements only as one option. But as you can see in scenarios 5 and 6, we're not able to group, say, A and C or B and C where we would have overlap. So any situation where one of those options has similarity, if you will, to the other, it would not be an option available to us. So I think as of a week ago, I wasn't prepared for this level of detail, but I am hoping that this is very helpful right now as we look ahead at what we may bring back from the committee, or if you have any additional direction given this additional insight on ballot options.
Thank you for clarifying that for us, because that was definitely a question, from last week. And then I think the other question that I was hearing too, that I've thought through and has been raised is, so this is considered a bond measure and would require 60% approval rating?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And are there any other scenarios that takes it where it's not a 60% approval rating?
Only if we were a school district. So I am not aware of any other options that other than the 60% requirement related for park improvements.
Commissioner French, I see you raised your hand.
Yeah, actually, there is another option. You could go to the voters with the levy lid lift, and that would get you, and now I'm going a little bit from memory, so I'm going to have to ask legal to confirm the timetable. I think the maximum out you can go on a levy lid lift is 9 years. But you'd want to confirm that it might be shorter, or it might be variable, depending upon whether it's a school district or whether it's a county or city government. But the levy lid lift is the other option you've got, and that only requires a simple majority.
I think Commissioner French is correct on that. There was, I remember back in 2017 when that was explored. I think he's right. I was thinking 10 years, but I mean, either way, 9 or 10, a much shorter period of time than a 20-year bond.
Okay, I will follow up with legal and see if we can verify that option and what that might look like in terms of financing, similar to what we provided for the bond.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then I think on our next slide, I work on follow-up. There was a great recommendation to look into some of the other alternate delivery methods for capital construction. I had an opportunity to align a fantastic presentation from ALSC CEO Rustin Hall with several others. And in fact, Rustin took the time to apply a timeline to our phase 2 improvements. And here you can see the traditional design bid build on the top half of the slide would have us ready to go out to bid the first week into August. If we look at the progressive design build, we're looking at the first week in November. And on the next slide, if we were to provide the GCCM, it also would have us land the first week into November. So specific to the phase 2 improvements, the design bid build approach will save us about 3 months and would place us in a better position to utilize that narrow construction window of mid-September through mid-March as far as having plans ready to go and out to bid. So we did have a chance to look at that, and for, again, phase 2 only, the traditional design bid build approach would be the best option with the time constraints. Although I will say some of the other delivery methods look like they could be very favorable as we look at the remaining phases. I think they're definitely worth additional consideration as if and when we get to that point in time. So we have that. And then on my next slide, we're ready to, again, we had some questions related to funding, and we're asked to explore whether the city of Spokane Valley may be interested in contributing to this, as well as the Spokane Indians that came up. And speaking to the city of Spokane Valley, Scott and I had an opportunity to meet with several city officials late last week. And they were very open to scheduling time for staff and others to present and inform the council of the project, and to, again, as a first step towards inquiring on this question. So while we don't have an answer today, I feel like we did make some progress towards exploring this option, and we'll continue on that path. And with regard to the Spokane Indians contribution, I believe Mr. Duff is, I see his smiling face there, and I will defer to Mr. Duff for what that response may be.
Perfect. Thanks, Doug. In addition to responding directly to that question too, I also have a request I'd like to make. We talked a little bit about the 50% or 60% civil majority or the super majority. That was news that we learned late last week, early this week. And Commissioner French, thank you for bringing up the creative potential solution of the levy lid lift. But the change from 50% to 60% is concerning for us, for sure. So my request would be, in addition to the ballot measure, could we, the Spokane Indians, spend a little more time with county staff and other stakeholders, such as the City of the Valley, that I know we've started some conversations with, just to talk through some potential additional approaches that we could be exploring. So can we take a little more time to have some additional conversations? It seems like there's still some education that needs to occur with some of those stakeholders. So that's one request I have for the board. Thoughts?
I don't know if I think so. And for my purposes, I think, we are just, starting this last week was really starting the conversation and trying to get going. We know we've got timeframes, to try to meet and look at, but I'm happy to, continue this conversation and let you have more dialogue amongst yourselves. Commissioner French and Commissioner Kearns, your thoughts?
Yeah, if the alternative is, us taking a vote today, I don't feel I'm in a position to take a vote today. So yeah, no, I'm totally comfortable with you taking additional time. I would hope you would take more time and kind of work this through, because yeah, I think we have a lot of questions still that need answered. So and you're completely right. Operating under the assumption of 50% versus 60, then yeah, that probably absolutely going to change the approach that you're going to do. So I'm totally fine with that.
Commissioner French?
Yeah, I'm fine too.
And I know I'm the one driving the urgency to the timeline. So this is counterintuitive and counterproductive to what we're trying to create. But I just think we've got one shot at this, one shot to get it right. And we need to get the right people in the room, the right conversations going. So although it's definitely going to slow our timeline down, I believe this is the right thing to do and the right approach to take long term. So can I just set that up directly with Scott and Doug and kind of go from there? Is that the appropriate next step?
Yes, that's what I would suggest.
Okay. And then to directly answer your question, Doug, that I skirted at the beginning, sorry. At this time, with the ballot measure being the most likely pathway, I don't know that I'm quite ready to answer the question yet. I'm definitely not saying no, we wouldn't participate. I think if we land on the traditional ballot measure and it's a 60% super majority, I think we would be much more comfortable contributing to the promotion, the advertising of the actual bond itself. But that's not saying we wouldn't be willing to contribute to the design as well. But I almost feel like I need more information to directly answer that question as well, is my direct response right now.
I think that's understandable. Doug, are there any other comments that you have?
No, that's great. All of this, as Chris mentioned, has been designed around their timeline. So we've got plenty of time from my perspective. So we're happy to take all the time in the world that we have to work with. So that's easy. That's very, very helpful information.
I'll call you directly after this, Doug.
Uh-huh. Good. Well, hopefully you can see the relief on my face, and that's what I have. Unless Scott may have something to add, but if there's anything else that we can follow up on, I think thank you very much for your time.
I don't really have anything else. I think Doug covered it. But all the conversation with the Spokane Valley was a good one because, as I think the commissioners had mentioned last week, this while it's an owned facility by the county, it is in the city of Spokane Valley. So there is some benefit they have from the location of it, from the activities that occur. So I believe our next step, the Valley was going to connect with their council, talk about scheduling a meeting. It doesn't sound like they've really had any conversations as a legislative body around the master plan for Avista Stadium. So I think getting them up to speed and bringing them alongside during the conversation, including them with the frequent meetings that Doug and I have had with Chris and team, would be very timely and important.
Great. Thank you. Then we will let you guys continue to discuss and come back to us when you need to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the time, Chris. I know you're on vacation, so we appreciate you joining us today.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, Doug, we're good, right?
Yep, we're good.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, so next on the agenda is Bruce Russell, Todd Milkey, and Tessa Sheldon to discuss the small arms range. I'm not sure who wants to lead.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to get back to you and give you a briefing. I think Ron's driving our 2 slides that we have. The last time we met, we gave you kind of the quick down and dirty of the preliminary numbers that we had after the bid opening for this facility. Since then, Tessa's done an amazing job running numbers and looking at this project in so many different ways. But this slide here really kind of gives you a summary of where we were at versus the last time we had an in-depth discussion, which was in November of last fall. And again, we've tried to line this up so that we're really comparing apples to apples. The middle column, again, is what you see as the numbers we predicted as a result of the 100% design, recognizing that we had a lot of concern at that time about supply chain issues on some of the major components of the project. Once we went out to bid, that was kind of the truth telling. That is the column that you see on the far right, labeled as January 2022. And again, lining up the elements as we know them as of today. Really, the focus for this discussion is, are we in a position to go out for bid? And that is the upper portion of this chart. And so what you'll see is the design architect has stayed the same. That was a set cost that was negotiated at the roughly 2.8 million. But the next two rows are really our focus for the discussion today and potential action by the board tomorrow. And those are the bids as they came back on the specific components of this project. The base bid is the small arms range. That is the portion that we are in contract with the Air Force on. You'll see that in November at the 100% design, we believe that that was going to come in at just under $30 million for just that portion of the project. You'll see that instead that portion came in at under 22 million. So a substantial reduction. And these costs do include sales tax. The training facility, which is the complete training facility, we projected at about 10.8 million in November. And you'll see that that also came in substantially less than what we anticipated. So what you see as the construction bid subtotal is the summation of both the base bid, small arms range, as well as the training facility with all of its components, came in at about 30.1 million, 30.2 million. And that is really what we are asking the board to consider and taking action tomorrow, is to award the bid to the, award the project to the lowest bidder at 3.174 million. Below that, you'll see the other components of the project, where we thought we were in November versus where we are today. But again, the action tomorrow is really about awarding the bid. The number that's on the bottom is the number that we believe the county will have to bond for to cover the overall cost of the project. The last thing I would note is at the very bottom, you'll see that the Air Force is contributing about 15.26 million towards the capital costs of the small arms range. So again, as you take a look at the number as bid, came in at 21.763. And of that number, roughly 15.266 will be covered by the payments, the lease payments made by the Air Force that can be contributed towards the construction of that portion of this project. Just real quickly, in case there are questions, the second slide, just so you know that it's there. Ron, if you could advance to the next slide. This is the status of the county's real estate excise tax projected out, really over the next 5 years, which is kind of seen as kind of the view of the projects that we know that are out there as of this date. So it does not show any of the projects being retired or anything like that. But I think most notably about this is what you see is that over the next 5 years, none of the projects that are anticipated or the current projects require the board or the county to dip into any of the fund balance. That revenues, anticipated revenues, would support the debt payment, debt and interest payment for all of the current projects and requested projects as you have before you. With that, unless Scott, Bruce, or Tessa have more to add, is my quick summary on where we're at today and what action we're asking the board to take tomorrow. And I'm also prepared to give you an update with regard to where the Air Force is on this project, anything like that.
My fellow commissioners have any questions? Seeing none, yeah, I guess I just want to, make sure that, that in discussions with the Air Force that they're good with where we're at here on this, since they're a big part of once we award the bid.
There are two elements that the Air Force is looking at that we do not believe will impact our ability to move forward. So one is do they want to you'll recall that we are moving the move-in date back 1 year. We were hoping originally it was going to be October of this year. Instead, it's going to be October 1st of 2023. So what that means is instead of paying their fees over 8 years, that would shrink it to 7. Their second proposal would be to simply start the payback at the time that they take occupancy of the building and then do it for 10 years. The amount of money for the construction side of the project, the capital side, will not change for the county. The only difference that it would make is they would contribute to 3 more years of operations and maintenance. So again, it does not change the total number to the Air Force. It does not require them to amend the contract that they currently are under for that purpose. It's just a matter of choosing which payment table is their preference. They expect that issue to be resolved hopefully before the end of this week. Jeff Johnson thought it would be probably by midweek of this week. Again, shouldn't change any of the financial numbers and should be easily resolvable. The second item is regarding the HVAC system. You may recall that they were looking for an air system that was a single pass system. And that is according to their uniform building code. I'm going to draw a blank on the acronym for it, but that is the system that is their standard HVAC system for these type of facilities. We had made a request that this facility include air conditioning, and it is slightly more. That number is incorporated in all the numbers we presented. It would allow us to address 3 specific issues. One is we recognize that we have some hot summers, and when you have a building with no air conditioning and it's 90 to 110 outside, that would make that building very uncomfortable to go into and participate in any type of training program in the height of summer. The second thing is the Washington State Energy Code requires us a different level of filtration and air circulation. It would be more difficult to meet that standard under the system that would be the Air Force default system. And then finally, the item is their default system takes outside air, brings it through the building once, and then exits the building. That would make it difficult in the height of the wildfire season in the Northwest, and may make air quality a little bit more difficult to address, where the system we're proposing, the air conditioning, would make it easier to address that system. So we have asked for a waiver of their fallback code and allow us to go forward with air conditioning of this facility. So we expect to have their thumbs up or thumbs down on this waiver probably within a week to a week and a half. If they decide that they are not comfortable in having this as part of their facility, which is, we think, probably a far less chance of happening as opposed to them just accepting the waiver request, it would result in a reduction in cost. So a reduction in change order cost for this facility.
Thank you. I saw Commissioner French had taken himself off audio a few minutes ago. Commissioner French, do you have a comment?
No, not specifically. So what you're asking, what you're asking us to do is basically just authorize you to go out to bid. So how long will the bid process last?
So we have already received the bids. So what we're asking tomorrow is to award the bid and allow facilities and purchasing to enter into contract negotiations, which we anticipate would probably take 1 to 2 weeks. And at that point, we would be in a position to move forward. We should have the final nuance answers from the Air Force on which repayment schedule that we're going to follow, and whether HVAC, air conditioning, is part of the HVAC system or not.
So, so then the other question is for Gary and maybe Scott. Do we want to have a conversation? We got an updated number from Gary here this morning talking about our fund balance. Do we want to have a conversation about maybe using any of that fund balance to buy down some of this debt before we go bond it? And so I raised that as a question for you. And then, Madam Chair, are you looking, well, you're going to vote on a consent agenda tomorrow to
Yes.
approve moving forward the contract. So that'll get taken care of. So the other question is, when do we want to have a conversation about how we want to finance this?
Gary?
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, our fund balance has been reduced right now because of the loan to the PFD. And then through the course of the next few months, it'll continue to decline until our next receipt of property taxes. You certainly could continue to use a portion of the general fund balance if you so wish to offset some of the cost to reduce the cost of bonding. However, there's a point at which you want to keep these reserves up because that in effect allows us to keep our current credit rating for the bond issuance. So there's a balance there that has to be struck, and you have to be careful with showing a diminished fund balance.
Scott, I see you raised your hand.
Yes, so the timing is right on. Commissioner French, I just had sent an email up to Gary on this very topic. What I would suggest we do is from Bruce, if we could get an estimate of spend down on the construction contract, that would be helpful so that we have a sense of when some of the big submissions might be coming. And it'll help us kind of overlay that with what Commissioner French and the other commissioners are going to want to see with regards to financing options, timing of bonds, how much, and what do we use for each of those things. So I think this is ripe for a conversation within the upcoming weeks with the commissioners.
Good. I can get you that.
Yeah, I would say it's going to definitely be a conversation and bring back to us with more information as to what we think we can do or not do. And knowing too, we're also going to have, potential, revenue replacement coming in on ARP into the general fund. So I think it's definitely a conversation we need to have, but I think you probably have a lot more information that you need to provide us than what we have today. So, Mr. Milkey?
Yeah, just as you consider the financing elements, and I know this was part of our discussion with Jim Amacio and Scott this morning, is my understanding these are different types of bonds of what the Air Force is going to participate in, what the county can participate in. And so my understanding is that the small arms range portion was anticipated to be bonded over 10 years. That's the Air Force repayment structure, and that the remaining part of the project was going to be bonded over 20. So the fact that maybe there's some anticipation of issuing 2 bonds to cover this project provides you with some additional flexibility as you consider the best options for the county.
Very good. Scott, you will be able to take that into consideration as you think about that.
Will do. And just a little bit more on what Todd said. We did, as he mentioned, we all had a meeting this morning with the Air Force. I'm very comfortable with the 2 remaining items that are outstanding from the Air Force. It doesn't change the contractual relationship with us today in terms of their obligation or commitment to participate in the capital costs for the small arms range. They're really just pieces that are more kind of administrative in nature, and our risk is very minimal, if at all, with regards to the commissioners taking action on awarding the bids. It also gives Bruce a little bit of breathing, knowing that he can get these contracts under these construction bids under contract to be able to meet the timeline that we have for an October 1 utilization of 2023.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments regarding the small arms range? Seeing none, I just want to thank you all for being on and informing us about it, and it'll be on the 2 o'clock agenda tomorrow.
Thank you much.
Okay, so we are now a little bit ahead of schedule. So Ashley Cameron is supposed to be up at 3:20. I don't see her yet. Oh, she is there. So very good. So Ashley, I see that you've got a discussion regarding the public defender selection appointment and then review performance of a public employee.
Correct. So I can do the public defender appointment first, and then the discussion of the employee would need to be in an executive session. They're 2 separate issues, but the public defender selection committee has been meeting since the end of December. They went through the entire interview process, and they did select and vote upon the candidate to be appointed, and that was done last Friday morning. So Colin Charbonneau was the named person that will be appointed into the public defender for Spokane County position. And there is a resolution in your consent agenda packet for you to review and approve tomorrow as a part of your regular agenda. But I wanted to give you a briefing as to what the selection committee decided and when.
Thank you. And Commissioner Kearns, I think you sat on the selection committee.
Correct. Yes.
And so I apologize that I don't know who this is. So can you give us a little background?
Yeah, he works for the PD's office. I believe he's a senior attorney currently. If you could help me out with how long he's been there, I want to say it was early 2000s is when he started.
2006. So he's worked his way up. Yep.
He's been there a long time. He's had supervisory roles, and he was the unanimous selection of the committee.
Very good. Thank you. That's exciting to have somebody from within to take over that position. Very good. Okay, so then the next item is then an executive session item. How long do you anticipate we will be in executive session?
5 minutes. I just need to give you a brief update.
Okay, and I'm just going to see, do we want to, is there miscellaneous items we want to go over before we go into executive session? So that way then we can just, take ourselves out after that. Commissioner French?
I don't have any miscellaneous items, but I do have another executive session pending a potential litigation that I'd also like to add to the mix for this afternoon. And that would include everybody that's on our screen, including Miss Cameron.
Okay. And how long do you anticipate that to take?
I'm hoping 15 minutes.
15 or 10?
I'm going to be lucky to get it into 15.
Okay. Okay. Are there any other items that we have from miscellaneous prior to us going into executive session? Gary.
Thank you, Commissioner Kinney. There's just one thing that I want the board to be aware of. We have to submit by deadline today, report to Treasury on ARP funds. And the software is forcing us to make a selection on either taking the minimum lost revenue or not. However, the GFOA has given us advice per Heather that we're not going to be held to that selection. But in order to complete electronically the report, we have to check a box on that report, and it's due today. So the way in which I think we should go is to not take the minimum of the lost revenue, which is 10 million in our case, because in conferring with Jason Link, he thinks that because they changed some of the parameters for the calculation for lost revenue, we could come out far ahead of the 10 million if we did the calculations. So I just wanted you to be aware that we have to submit it today. And my recommendation is we just check the box that we're not taking the minimum, but you can change your mind on it. So more informatory than ever, but just so that you keep that in the back of your mind that we just had to make a selection to submit the report today.
Okay, do you need a motion for that? Or just head
No,
nod? Sure.
Because you're able to change your mind later, if you just give me a head nod, that we can go ahead and submit under that box, Jeff.
I know I'd be in favor of using the formula, not the minimum. Commissioner Kearns?
Yeah, I agree with you, Commissioner CUNY. I think the formulaic method is the way to go. It gives us greater flexibility to be able to assist our citizens. It gives more flexibility to the dollars. So I think that's a win for the community.
Commissioner French?
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Jeff, do you have a miscellaneous?
No, just if you had any questions regarding what Gary was talking about.
Okay. No, thank you.
Can I ask Gary, could you send us all a copy of that plan that is submitted, just so we have the most updated draft that is sent?
Certainly, no problem.
Thank you.
It'll just be all zeros, but you can see it.
And Scott, any other miscellaneous items for today?
No, Gary and Jeff covered it.
Okay, thank you. So then it is 3:13, which will take us just a couple of minutes to get into executive session. So I'm going to say we're going to officially be in at 3:15. And we will be in for 20 minutes. And there's two items we'll be doing. We'll be review the performance of a public employee with Ashley Cameron, our 3 commissioners and our executive management team. And then the second one will be pending the potential litigation with Ashley Cameron and our executive management team, and our civil attorney, Mark McLean, will be in both of those executive sessions as well. Am I getting that right, Mark, by making sure I announce you as well?
Thank you. Yes, you're doing great. Appreciate it.
Okay, so it is 3:15. We'll be in for 20 minutes, and then we will be adjourning at the end of that executive session, and we will then reconvene tomorrow for our 2 o'clock consent agenda.